On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
All right, everybody, before we get into this episode, I just want to go over two things really quick. The first is that this will be part one of a two-part series with Jeff Dolan. When we recorded this, it was actually back in May. I like to have a lot of episodes recorded just in case things happen. And so the podcast episode obviously hasn't come out yet. But if the timelines don't make sense to you when you're listening, it's because this was actually recorded in May when he was back in the NBA. Part two will go over the fact that he is actually back in professional baseball now, in addition to his isometrics course that he just released. So just bear with the difference in the timelines and understand that there is a lot of value coming from this episode, and his discussion on the NBA training compared to professional baseball is really relevant. And then in part two, we'll talk more where he is currently in his career, being back in professional baseball, and the isometrics course. The other thing that I wanted to cover before we begin is just a shout out to all of our all-star sponsors of the PBSCCS. Those companies are Momentous, Woodway, Aura Ring, Garden of Life, Direct Fitness Solutions, Proven 4, and Clean Athlete. Thank you to all of those companies for sponsoring us. With that being said, let's get into the episode with Jeff. All right, everybody, I'm here with Jeff Dolan, formerly of the New York Yankees organization and now currently in the NBA with the Phoenix Suns. Jeff, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate your time. Tell the listeners about yourself, if you would, please.
Well, first off, Coach, thanks for having me. This is cool. So as Coach Chris alluded to, my name is Jeff Dolan, and I'm currently the assistant strength and conditioning coach with the Phoenix Suns of the NBA. So obviously, for all you baseball people, yes, I am a basketball strength coach currently, but I spent the last 5 years of my career in baseball, last two in college baseball at the University of Illinois, and previously 3 years with the New York Yankees, 1 year as a spring training complex intern, and then 2 full-time years, one in the Appalachian League and one in the South Atlantic League.
So before we dive into the NBA and how life is for you there, I want to know your best professional baseball story. And if you were in the Appy League, I really hope that you have some good stories. So what sticks out to you when you think back on your pro ball days, like as the best memory that you have?
So this was a tough one. I couldn't exactly choose which way I wanted to go with it because I have a lot of hilarious stories. As you have worked in that league and you know how things can go. I have a lot of funny stories from taking Ubers in various small towns around the country. But my favorite story is a little bit more unique and a little bit more like inspirational, cool type of story. So my first game ever an affiliate as a strength coach. Game 1, Pulaski Yankees. I believe it was in the first inning. Bob first. He might have even been our leadoff hitter. He gets hit in the face with a pitch. So, whole thing, fractured orbital bone, etc. And for some reason, the medical coordinator decided to leave him with our affiliate team as opposed to bringing him back to Tampa. So he just, let his face heal and hung out with the team and did all his rehab with me and our athletic trainer, Manny Azoa. And we got, that was maybe a 6-week rehab, something like that. So that's most of a short season. But we get him back, and his first game out, we eventually got him, the face shield that goes onto the helmet, like Stanton and those guys wear. But the first game out, like for the first few games, we didn't have that yet. All we could get him was like a Rip Hamilton, like full face mask. So trot the kid out there, and his first 3 at-bats, obviously, the other team knows that this is this kid's first time back, and so they're pitching him inside. He's bailing out on everything, and I'm just like, oh, God, like, we should have just shut this kid down for the year. 4th at-bat, this kid comes up with the bases juiced and hits an absolute nuke over the right field fence. As the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like, I think I almost I grabbed my athletic trainer so hard, I think I almost like popped his shoulder out. I was so stoked to see it. It was awesome, and that stands out as my favorite pro baseball story by far.
No, that's really cool, man. And I love success stories of rehabs. And we all know how difficult it can be to get guys to come back sometimes and to play without that fear of, something happening again, especially like for getting hit in the face, being able to get back in the batter's box and face guys. And with the velo and everything nowadays, like it's terrifying to think about getting hit in the head or in the face with 95 plus. And like, especially at those lower levels, like some of those guys don't know where that 95 plus is going when they do throw that hard. And so for that guy to be able to get back in the box and take care of business, that's really cool. And, kudos to yourself and to the AT there, just, keeping him right, keeping him ready. And when his opportunity came, he made the most of it. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I do want to selfishly, I want to talk about life in the NBA and how it differs with your life in professional baseball. Just, anything that you want to share, whether it's your day-to-day life or your in-season responsibilities versus your off-season responsibilities. If you can dive into the training that you guys are doing, really anything that you want to share about the NBA, that's kind of what I want the focal point of this talk to be for sure.
Sure. So, kind of starting with the similarity. Well, let's start with the differences. So, I would say the best part about working in basketball is I know exactly when the game is going to start. I don't have to deal with rain or snow or anything like that. I all know around when the game is going to end. So I don't have to deal with 9-inning games taking 4 hours, let alone 15-inning games. So that's kind of the best part, I would say. Obviously, the challenge in being a baseball strength coach is just managing these guys' stress when you have a game every single day. It's somewhat similar in the NBA. We don't play as many games. We average between 3 and 4 games per week. But obviously, any given NBA game, guy who plays starter minutes, 30-plus minutes, is quite taxing. So whereas the basketball schedule yields itself to being able to adjust things and have some high days, low days, build in recovery, vary training throughout weeks type of thing, that's a large challenge in baseball that's so monotonous. So you're going to do exactly the same thing every day unless you're a starting pitcher. So that's a big difference there. Injury consideration, sport to the other, obviously baseball has majority upper extremity injuries, shoulders, elbows, etc. Basketball, you're dealing with ankles and knees primarily. Lower back and hip issues are common between the two sports. Don't see too many hamstrings in basketball because they don't get to top speed. So just kind of being able to manage training a little bit differently based off of what we're trying to hopefully reduce in terms of injuries is a little bit different sport to sport. And obviously cultural differences. Every sport has its own lingo, its own culture, that if you're going to be part of it, you just immerse yourself in and you learn how to fit in and how to communicate with everyone through it. So pro baseball, obviously you have to learn Spanish. You have to learn about Latin American culture, especially Dominican culture. A little bit different group of athletes that we deal with in the NBA, but the Suns have a very international roster right now. We have Australia, Spain, Croatia, Bahamas, France, you name it, you can keep going. So that's, when I decided to come over to the basketball side, one of the main things I wanted to get out of it was to put myself through that uh, professional challenge again of working with a sport where I don't know the culture and I'm unfamiliar with how things work and just having to figure that whole thing out. Which, when I started working in baseball, would have been 5-6 years ago now, I had to do the same thing because I didn't play baseball in college or anything like that. So I had to completely immerse myself and figure out just what it is to be a baseball guy. Same thing in basketball now. Similarities between the NBA and pro basketball. I mentioned before, being a stress manager, understanding on a day-to-day basis what your athletes have experienced in the last 24 hours, or maybe the last week, 2 weeks, whatever, and being able to adjust on the fly based off of what they have going on, being able to honestly communicate with your athlete about how they're feeling and what you can do in that moment to help maximize the performance come tip off. You know, communicating with medical staff and with sports staff, exactly the same. Trying as much as possible to make congruent things that we're doing on the physical development side as well as the skill development side, so we can make sure that we're, you know, two vehicles headed in the same direction with the same goals for each player. And ultimately that's what it's about. No matter what sport you're working with, you have to go about your business every single day and do it with the best of your ability to make sure that you can help maximize the potential of these young men in this case, and so that we can hopefully bring some championships here to Phoenix.
So how about in terms of like a training situation? When I think of basketball versus baseball, I think, in baseball you go to a city and you camp out in that city for 3 to 5 days, and then you go to a different city, and it's the same thing. Where in basketball, it's, you play one game against the Lakers, and then you fly out, and then you're on the other side of the country playing against the Sixers, and then you're in the middle of the country playing the Bucks. Like, how is that affecting your training that you guys do with the guys?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, that you're pretty much going to be on like week-long road trips in pro baseball. So the easiest way to set it up is to say, hey, like a 3-game series or a 4-game series or whatever, you have the odd off, 2-game series or whatever, but pretty much, hey, if you get a lift in sometime during this series, that's going to equal out to about 2 lifts per week, which is probably going to be a pretty good situation, unless you want to split it up or microdose or do something a little more special depending on the guy. Basketball is not as predictable or uniform in terms of schedule. So, and also when you toss in practice days or maybe an off day where maybe some of the guys, just some of the younger guys, are going to come in and get shots up or get some work in the weight room, that type of thing. That all makes it a little bit more difficult to schedule. And also we give a lot of autonomy to the guys in terms of they know what they need to feel best, especially the guys who have been through it for a few years. So some of them like to lift after a game on a home game, for example. Some of them don't want to do anything on a game day. Some of them on a practice day might want to lift before practice, after practice, that type of thing. So the key to being successful is just to have great relationships with your players so that you can have honest conversations with them every day and help them get what they need on that particular day. Whether that's, a good solid lift, or whether that's, hey, let's do some stuff just to make you feel good and trot it out there and get practice done and then get some food or something like that.
How about when you guys travel? Are there gyms available on the road at the arenas, or do you guys just travel with a trunk like in minor league baseball type situation? How does that work?
Oh, we actually do both. So the places that we stay, the hotels we stay, usually have fairly nice hotel gyms where we can get a little bit of work done. Knighting, in quotations. But usually they have at least dumbbells up to 50, and then we have a trunk that we travel with where we can get a good solid training stimulus out of anything that we were to do in a hotel. And also, we are always going to have some sort of access to a weight room in an arena when we're a visiting team. A lot of the arenas have like a designated visiting weight room. Usually is pretty small, but it gets the job done. Some are really nice, and sometimes we have like a car with some dumbbell blocks and some bands and med balls, that type of thing. So it's about just how can you maximize what you have at any given time, and then when we're at home and we know we have all the sources available to us that we're accustomed to, then we really make use of that.
Do you think being in the minor leagues and kind of having to deal with some of the struggles that we have to go through has kind of helped you be prepared to be a coach in the NBA? It sounds like a very similar situation. Like you got to maximize what you can with what you have.
100%. Being a minor league baseball strength coach, I believe has equipped me to do any strength coaching job in the world, because as well as anyone, if you can figure out how to get a team of 35 ball players, most of whom don't speak English, through a YMCA in Bristol, Virginia, you can figure out how to do pretty much anything. You have actual facilities. Or how many times a week or a day when you're a minor league baseball strength coach do you have up with some sort of adequate training session for a professional athlete in a bullpen using a weight vest and some bands? It makes it very easy when you have an actual facility to use, whether that's, just a little hotel weight room with dumbbells up to 50, or in Boston, we get to use a full Equinox gym.
Yeah, I'm on the record saying it about probably 2 million times now that I wish everybody could just spend a season as a professional baseball strength coach, and especially those lower levels. I was in Bristol, so obviously you know how the Appy League works, and it's like you have to really, really think on your toes and be creative to get guys to do things. And that, I mean, even like, the English-speaking American players, like it's hard enough to get them to do stuff, and then you throw in that language barrier. And a lot of us learn Spanish as we go in pro ball, but my first year was when I was in Bristol. I didn't know a single word in Spanish, and it was like, what am I doing here? I was very overwhelming, but at the same time, you learn and it prepares you for just about anything else, I think, anyways.
I couldn't agree more with that.
Do you think, or do you see, since you've been in both baseball and basketball, do you think the lifting cultures are different? It's kind of like, a lot of people say baseball, like, oh, we back in the day, we used to run miles and not lift weights. And it's kind of changed to this culture where if you don't lift, you're kind of the outlier. Do you see the same thing in the NBA, or is there kind of like a culture situation where guys don't like to lift still? Like, how does that work for you guys?
It depends on the guy, and I would be lying if I said there weren't guys who aren't fans of the weight room, but you'll find that in every sport. And again, having worked in pro baseball, I've seen nothing here that surprises me in terms of guys not, being big weight room guys. The inherent challenge for a strength coach in that situation, especially here where I am at a level where players do have a ton of autonomy over what they're going to do, and that's just how it is. The key is being able to identify what's the most efficient and effective thing that we can do to help this particular athlete in this particular situation. And then how do I best communicate with him? This is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. And this is how it's going to benefit you. There is, with some athletes, most of my guys are great. And they really do want to work. But occasionally you have to have some salesmanship and be completely egoless if they don't want to do exactly what you do on that given day. That's the finesse of working at this level, and you find that at the low levels of pro baseball, and certainly a little bit more so as you go up. So you just learn how to be very skilled at communicating and dealing with people, dealing with egos, that type of thing.
Yeah, I've had people describe it to me as like the used car salesman. And like, I think regardless of the sport, baseball, basketball, whatever it may be, I think, like you said, you're going to run into that where it's the nature of the beast. You have terrible road trip and guys are struggling at the dish, or, they got knocked out of their start early, and, or they have some family things going on. And like, sometimes they just don't have it and they just don't want to train. And, sometimes, it's better to pull back, and sometimes you kind of have to push them through that. And that's the art of the coaching aspect that, it just comes with time and being around guys. And we've all kind of either put our foot in our mouth or, said something stupid when we shouldn't have said it, or pushed a guy when we shouldn't, or the other way, be the guy that has too much feel and let guys get away from it. Like you have those situations, and then you learn from them and you just progress. And some of that is just, reps and coaching over the years that, that when you first get into something, you can't have that. You need the experience.
A lot of the challenge comes from, or maybe the key to success in that situation is just understanding that these guys, these athletes really, truly do have a ton going on. I know, people that don't see it up close necessarily get a feel for just how much stress these guys are under at all times. Obviously, the physical demands of the game are extremely hard. You add in travel, which is sporadic, and there's no real discernible pattern to it. In the NBA, a little bit more regular in baseball, as we talked about before. But there's also media obligations. There's community outreach events type of things. There are agents and marketing and sponsors that they have to deal with. There are family and friends that a lot of these guys help take responsibility for and have to take care of. And also, just like in baseball, where, okay, you've got, let's say, your center fielder, and the manager wants to talk to him about his approach to hitting off this starter tonight, and then the hitting coach wants to have him take however many swings, tee and toss, and then get him in the cage for stretch and before the game and all that, and then he's got to go out and actually play the game. And same thing in the NBA. Every player has their own personal skills coach, who's part of the coaching staff. So they want them to work on things, and then they've got film and all these different elements. Everybody's competing for their time. So as a strength coach, the real key to finessing it is to make sure that you aren't a burden to them. You are not saying, hey, like, I know this, and this person needs your time and are demanding and have their own, goals for you. And, oh, by the way, I need you to get on the bar and squat however many pounds because, like, that helps me feel good. The key is understanding how to balance all of that, how to know when to pull back when necessary, because probably no one else will, and just to have some feel and to really get a sense of what this guy actually needs.
Yeah, the thing is, like, to the outsider, the fan or whatever, like, they just see the game, right? And they don't understand, like, one, these guys have their families that they have to deal with, and if they don't perform at an incredibly high level, that takes food off the table for their families. And sometimes for us, like, I mean, I don't know about in the NBA, but I'm sure you experienced it in baseball, is like they use us just to vent sometimes. And like sometimes
Mhm.
you just need to be that ear for them, and you don't say anything, you just let them vent, and then they're like, okay, I'm good, now we can do what I need to do. And sometimes if you push them too hard, and they'll take it out on you, and it's not personal to you. It's they had an autograph session for an hour, and then they had a photo shoot for an hour, and then they had skills practice for an hour, and they still haven't eaten lunch, and they have another media obligation. Before you know it, it's game time, and you're like, where were you? I needed you to do this. And they blow up on you. Well, I mean, you have to understand they have a lot of things going on, and the outside fan doesn't always see that. And so it is a big obligation. And like I said, they have a lot on their plate, and there's a lot of stress. At the end of the day, they are, professional athletes, they get paid well, whatever. But the amount of stress that they have to perform at a high level when everybody else is already, the elite of the elite in that sport, is just an absurd amount of pressure, and they have an absurd amount of things to do to stay at that level.
Exactly.
Do you have any off-season responsibilities? I know you live out here in Phoenix. Do you guys still have players that train at the complex year-round? Like, I know in baseball we talk about telling guys to take time off from throwing and being away. Like, do you tell guys to take time off from shooting, or are they just allowed to shoot and practice whenever?
Well, yeah, usually we would say, okay, take a few weeks away, just get away from it. Um, Obviously, things are really weird right now with the COVID situation, so we'll see what ends up happening there. If this in a normal off season, a normal summer, there are some guys who stick around and train and live here in Phoenix. They're not required to, so we do some site visits, that type of thing. A lot of guys like to either go home or go live in Los Angeles, something like that. So we'll send some strength staff out there just to do the check-in thing, and then we do some pre-draft stuff and some NBA combine stuff, and then we have summer league in July. So that's a short-term thing with some young guys, some new draft guys and some G League guys, that type of thing. And after that, we have a little bit of downtime. And then last year, guys started rolling in for more kind of organized but unorganized voluntary stuff, kind of in August. And they play some 5-on-5 and do some individual work and that type of thing. And it was a pretty smooth transition this year from that into official training camp. So I think everybody did a really great job of making that transition as seamless as possible. And I know a lot of baseball organizations will do that. I know a lot of guys come early prior to spring training now just to get their reps in and get their volume up to the point where it's not a crazy spike when day one spring training hits. And hopefully that's been helpful in mitigating some of the load spike related injuries that probably we have seen historically in every sport in a training camp.
How about staff wise? Is it just you and one other strength coach? Like just your whole, maybe like a whole quote unquote performance department, nutritionists, mental skills, ATs. Like, what does that staff layout look like for you guys?
We have a big staff. I think we have the biggest staff in the league currently. And we're all new. We all, well, still technically in our first year with all together with the Suns. So we have myself and Corey Schlesinger as our head strength coach. And then there's two others on the performance staff. So our director of performance is Daniel Bove. He doesn't deal as much with day-to-day working with players. He deals a lot with the data, with all the load monitoring, tracking, with all the report generation, with communication with the basketball staff, the front office, all that type of thing. And then we have another sports scientist who deals with a lot of the granular day-to-day sports science initiatives, like taking RPEs, putting connects on units or GPS units on guys. And he also helps a lot with the kind of report generation, that type of thing, so that we can very easily streamline the process of assessing guys from a physical quality standpoint, determining the type of interventions that Corey and I are going to implement in the weight room at any given time during the year, and then tracking that progress, as well as just monitoring things from if we have a return to play scenario, or just if a guy is getting beat up, we can hopefully see some of those things and try to prevent or reduce some of the catastrophic issues that we might run into.
Gotcha. And then for yourself personally, in terms of just in-season responsibilities, do you see yourself more with rehabs? Are you just kind of wherever you're needed? Are you doing like reports and Corey's doing the weight room stuff, or one of you running like stretch and the other is here? Like, how does that dynamic work between the two of you?
So we basically tag team everything. We are primarily responsible for, we kind of split the roster, and I have my guys that I'm primarily responsible for, and Corey does as well. That actually, a lot of that is determined by personalities. So Corey and I are very different personality wise. And I think that's actually why we work so well as a team, because we complement each other in a lot of ways. So some people respond a little bit better to his style of communication, which is a little bit more, he's more of this type of guy, whereas I'm a little bit more even keel. And depending on the guy, they might want a Corey type of personality or more of a Dolan type of personality. So then basically those 8 guys or 9 guys that I'm responsible for, I am their guy, and I work with them every single day, whether that's a full lift or whether it's just a recovery-based session or preparation session for practice, game day prep, something like that. If they are injured and a return to play candidate, I will be the primary weight room guy with that athlete, and I'll communicate with the medical staff every day, multiple times a day, on what we're doing there. So that's kind of how we break it up. It is definitely easier to manage than a roster of 35 or 25, but some of these guys present their own unique challenges that I stay plenty busy.
Yeah, I've heard that it's like the thing in the NBA is like the roster is smaller, so there's a little bit more one-on-one time, but some of the personalities are really strong, and like they might need more of that one-on-one time. And I mean, that's not a bad thing. I think if you can offer one-on-one time for an athlete, there's a lot more that you can provide to them in terms of, just correcting exercise, or even just shooting the shit and getting to know them a little bit and building that rapport and that relationship with them. I think those one-on-one moments do help with that for sure.
Absolutely. It helps a ton. And, realistically, if you know your athlete really well, that's just going to help you determine the most efficient bang for your buck interventions that you can give them. So 15 or 20 minutes with a guy, that's pretty good. Sometimes I might only have 10. So that obviously has its own challenges that come with it. But if you can trim all the fat and really determine the most effective thing to do with 10 minutes to help this guy, then you've done a good job. And being able to really know, like really know, from a force plate testing standpoint, what's their stiffness compliance index, what are their asymmetry what do their symmetries look like? What's their injury history? What's their personality? I've always been like this with all of my teams, even when I had big rosters, but when I only have a few guys to look after, it just makes it that much easier when they walk in the room, I can tell, okay, we're good or something's wrong. I need to go have a conversation here and see if it's something serious or what.
Yeah, right on, man. And not for nothing, I bet the force plate numbers are really cool to look at in the NBA, just with how freakish those guys jump and everything. But I'm going to transition us away. It's really, really interesting to hear about the NBA, and I'm appreciative that you're going to share with us. And now I just kind of want to get some more general strength and conditioning, questions to you. My first one is just, what do you believe in within strength and conditioning that others think you are crazy for believing?
I mean, I hope no one thinks I'm crazy.
We're all a little crazy in one way or the other.
Well, yeah, you're right. Us upstate New Yorkers, we're all crazy.
Yeah. Special.
Yeah, I try not to ever defend a rock. I try to literally learn every single methodology of training that I can, because chances are you're probably going to find yourself a situation where you'll be able to use it at least a little bit. So a good example, I mean, a lot of people hate on machine training, and that was me earlier in my career. And should you strictly train on machines? No, I don't think so. But there are certainly situations that you may have a veteran athlete, and maybe putting them on a machine is the best thing for them. You always have to consider, what am I trying to get out of this training stimulus in terms of an adaptation? So if I'm just attempting to stimulate some tissue growth or some tissue integrity work, then if you're not concerned about how much it's going to transfer to on-field stuff, at least directly, or if you're not concerned with trying to train the CNS for higher outputs, then I don't see any problem with putting someone on a machine. Is it the first thing I'm going to do every single time? No. But is it the best choice for some guys in some situations? Yeah. And I think that a lot of us at times get a little bit too focused on strength for strength's sake. And if you look at a lot of data from a lot of different sources, the point at which strength for strength's sake provides you with a diminishing return, that level is pretty low. So once someone's achieved a certain level of output, then they're probably good. And at that point, depending on where they're at in their career and what's going to help them get to the next level or stay at the high level, then you determine what to do from there. So whether that's just more of a protective style of training in the weight room, slow tempos, isometrics, that type of thing, or whether that's more of a power output, high speed, velocity based program. Depends on the guy and it depends on the situation. But you talked about NBA force plates, and this is the best example that I can come up with here. We have a guy on our team who takes off with more force than he lands. And if you ask people who look at force plate data all the time, like the guys at ForceDex, this is the only person they've ever seen that is the case. So if you have an athlete like that, I don't need to make him stiffer, and I don't need to make him more explosive. He's literally the freakiest freak. He might be the freakiest freak in the NBA in terms of that. So, I can put him on a machine maybe, or just have him do some isometrics, that type of thing, and try to maybe mitigate that stiffness just a little bit, or just give him a little bit of stability or that type of thing. But we love the weight room, and we love big lifts, and we love explosive, fast stuff. But if a guy already has it and playing the game of basketball provides the opportunity to continue to train that quality, then I probably need to train them with the opposite quality.
Yeah, something that you alluded to there is you said when you were younger, you were kind of married, quote unquote, to certain things. And I think that's a common issue with a lot of coaches. And I'm in the same boat. When I was younger, it was whatever my mentors did, that's what works best for the athletes. Or a lot of people bring their own bias in. Like I'm a power lifter, so I think everybody should do the power lifts. Well, I'm an Olympic lifter, so everybody needs to do cleans and snatches. And it's sometimes you have to put those biases aside and just, like you said, look at what I need to get out of this session and do that with the athlete. And we go back to it, like being in minor league baseball really does test you to do that, because man, I would love to do a heavy upper body session today, but all I have is a TRX row that's hanging from the clubhouse door. What do I do? Or all I have is this band. Or, for us, like during this COVID situation, a lot of, minor league strength coaches are probably thriving because we don't have much more equipment than this anyways. But, that's whatever. But the big picture here is I agree with you 100%. I think the more that you can bring in and understand in terms of methodologies and training principles and approaches and things like that, the better prepared you are for when an athlete comes to you. Athletes are very smart with their bodies. And as we said, like training is becoming a more common thing, and not everybody trains one way, and if you only know your way and you get a player that comes to you that trains a totally different way, they're probably going to be turned off from you, and they're probably not going to have a great relationship with you. But if you can speak that language with them and just kind of find some middle ground on certain things, it's going to go a long way with you, at least from what I've seen anyways.
Absolutely.
So what do you think makes a strength and conditioning coach successful?
The thing that makes strength and conditioning coaches successful is being adaptable. Adaptability is the number one ability that a strength coach needs to have. So when you're a strength coach, especially at the pro level, whether it's baseball, basketball, whatever, doesn't matter. You need to realize that when you go into work that day, you're going to have at least 3 things go wrong. And the quality of the work that you do on that day is going to be determined by how you respond to those situations and how you handle it. So you just realistically need to be a plan B, plan C, plan D guy, because plan A's are great and you have to have them. And planning and strategizing is awesome. I love writing programs. Like I write programs for fun, but that's just not reality. We're not going to get all that done. So again, I go back to, so when I was at Illinois, we had a great question that we asked to all of our interview candidates. And that was, okay, practice ran late. You had a lift scheduled. You have a whole team coming in to use the weight room. You had an hour training scheduled, but now you only have 20 minutes. What do you do in 20 minutes? Go. And when you're in my situation in the NBA, you might not even have 20 minutes. So how do you adapt what you wanted to do and realistically get as much done as possible in that time that's actually going to help? And I mean, yeah, we keep talking about it, but minor league baseball teaches you how, I always tell people that minor league baseball taught me to do 3 things. It taught me how to figure out ways to train guys with no resources. It taught me how to coach someone that doesn't speak my language. So if you got verbal, visual, and kinesthetic cues that you can use, and verbal's out, you got to figure it out with one of those other 2. Or teach yourself how to speak Spanish, which we all end up doing, at least well enough to say, push your hips back. And the third thing is adjusting communication styles based off of certain people's egos, and immersing yourself in the culture and being able to have meaningful conversations and building relationships with sport coaches.
Yeah, man, the adaptability thing is huge. And like you said, you can have that plan, but man, that plan really never happens the way you plan it. And I'm not saying that you should just, ban having plans altogether, because then you're going in completely blind from the start. You have to have some sort of plan, but you have to have acceptable adjustments to that plan on what happens. And, for you in the NBA, you mentioned that you don't have rainouts or anything. And so you don't have guys floating around the clubhouse. And it's, when it rains, every minor leaguer becomes the best weatherman in the world. Dude, there's a 75% chance of rain at 7 o'clock. I don't think we're playing this game. Yeah. And it gets worse from there. And it's like, hey, we're in the middle of a training session right now. How about you? No, we're not going to play tonight. It's like, yeah, okay, well, how do you adjust even to something as simple as that? Or the manager is like, yeah, I don't want the guys to lift this series. Like, now you have to adjust to that. There's so many things that just come up. And like you said, I really do love that being adaptable is probably the number one key to having success, whether it's baseball or basketball, honestly. Do you have advice for others in the field, maybe young coaches who want to get in either to the NBA or in professional baseball, or just older coaches that have been around that, you just want to put your 2 cents in? Any advice that you have?
I think the key to the key to maximizing your value as a strength coach is to be able to, as much as possible, think outside the 4 walls of the weight room. Because the weight room will only take you so far. And in order to really, truly make yourself valuable, you need to, like I mentioned before, develop relationships with sport coaches, understand the game to the best of your ability. If you did not play that sport, it's going to be a taller order. I spent the last year learning about basketball. The advantage that I have is that I have a lot of people around me who can answer questions, and I do ask questions. And I get to see the game at the highest level every day. But I played basketball for like 1 year when I was maybe 12. So that has been a challenge. But if we really, truly do want to impact performance in a positive way, we need to understand what the demands of the sport are and how to go about best preparing the athlete to do that. The powerlifting will get you maybe a little bit of exit velo or a little bit of fastball velo if you go from really weak to a little bit stronger. But what do you do when you move beyond that? And what's really required of these athletes on a day-to-day basis when they go out there and compete?
I know I said I was going to transition us away from the NBA, but I do have one more question about it. Just you kind of got my mind going on it. In terms of relationships with the sport coaches and the strength coaches, how does it differ in baseball compared to in basketball? And I will say in baseball, there is this push now where it's a very collaborative approach where coaches are asking us questions, we're allowed to ask them questions, and we kind of work together. At the end of the day, it's just about getting the athlete to perform at their best in my mind, and it doesn't matter who it comes from as long as we can help. Are you seeing that in the NBA where you guys are working well together? Is there still kind of a divide? Like, how does that work for you guys?
I think there's a double-edged sword to the staff being so big in terms of like performance and medical. There are a lot of us, and there are a lot of basketball coaches as well. So obviously we talked about, a lot of one-on-one, a lot of individualized progression programs, both on court and off court. And that's awesome. But also there's a lot of people you have to communicate with about different situations. So I think it's a little bit easier when you're at an affiliate or you're in college where it's you, the strength coach, it's one athletic trainer and, a manager, hitting coach, pitching coach, whatever. And that's it. And, at the end of the day, it's you and the athletic trainer trying to keep these kids alive and just trying to communicate with sport coaches about how to get these guys better. And if you're in the minors, how do we get them called up and that type of thing. So it's no matter what sport you're in and no matter what level you're at, you're going to need to work really hard to build those relationships. just because ultimately that helps the player at the end of the day. And a lot of people talk about getting away from the silos approach. I've heard about that for years. Like, we can't just stay in our silos. And I 100% agree with that. I think a lot of people say that and don't actually try to fix it. And I understand that it can be a huge challenge to actually get that done. But it's on you as a strength coach to go to them and to try to be a part of their world, because oftentimes it won't necessarily go the other way.
Yeah, I can
Be seen
appreciate that
as
for sure, man. It's easier for us as strength coaches to go to the sport coaches than for the sport coaches to come to us. Like, we can, I mean, at least in baseball, we can stop over in the cage and just take a peek in, or, you know, when guys are playing catch during like after stretch, like, you can talk to the pitching coach or hang around and just check out the bullpens, like, just being visible and making it seem like you actually care. And I mean, honestly, you should care at the end of the day. And like, if you do, like, hey, you hang around. Like, for me, I've always liked just watching the guys in their natural environment, right? Like, a lot of these guys, like you said, some of them don't like to lift, but they love to play the game. And, you know, at the end of the day, we get to watch high level players every single day play their game and be in their natural habitat. And I mean, it's cool just to watch them to compete. And, you know, we play a very small part in their success, or sometimes in their failure, depending on if we're doing things the right way or not. But just showing that interest and going to the sport coaches, I think, just goes a long way in that relationship.
I think the worst thing that you can do is be the weights guy. You have to make yourself be part of the staff.
I agree completely. And I'm sorry that we went off tangent there with the, you know, the strength coach questions, but I think that is a relevant thing for us to discuss. But getting back to the other stuff, in terms of continuing ed, where are you going? Do you have any books that you'd recommend, podcasts that you're listening to, any seminars that you've been attending? Just where are you going for your continuing ed?
I always have at least 4 or 5 things going on in terms of continuing ed. Currently, I'm working on a couple projects that involve reading a lot of peer-reviewed research. But from a general recommendation perspective, if you were to just read Governing the Dynamics of Coaching by James Smith, if you were to read that once and then go back to page 1 and read it again, you would probably be ahead of most people, because literally everything you need to know is in there. It's a phenomenal resource. I think the best seminar to attend is the Central Virginia Sport Performance Seminar. Unfortunately for baseball guys, it's in the summer, so that's, you know, pretty much makes that impossible to attend. But yeah, I can't say good enough things about that event every year. Strength Coaching Network is a great website from my buddy Kier Wyndham Flat and Jay DeMayo. I'm not paid to say that. I just think it's awesome. And then I'm a big podcast guy as well. Just Fly, Mike Robertson's podcast is fantastic. Jay DeMayo, great podcast, Central Virginia, again, affiliated with the seminar there. So.
Yeah, Jay's a SUNYAC guy, right?
He is. He went to Cortland.
Cortland, yeah.
Another.
Yeah, I've always wanted to get to his seminar, but obviously, as you said, baseball, it's virtually impossible to get there in the summer. But I don't know, maybe if the situation dictates this year. I think he just announced that it's going to be, yeah, which is tough. I've only heard great things about that one. So
it's awesome. Oh, and I should give a plug to the MBSCA. We have a now virtual seminar coming up towards the end of the month. May 20 something, I forget the exact date, but if anyone's interested in basketball, definitely check that out. You get some CEUs for it, and you don't have to leave the comfort of your home. So check that out.
And we might be working on something as well with the PBSCCS in that realm.
Sweet.
So we'll kind of keep that under the wraps for now. But I want to finish this off with a lightning round, man. It's, just as long or as short of answers as you want to give. And then I promise I'll get you out of here. You cool with that?
Sure. That sounds awesome.
All right. Who is your biggest influence in the field of strength and conditioning?
For someone that I have not worked with or worked under, but I have learned a lot from, that would be Cal Dietz. The person who I've learned most from that I have worked with is Corey Schlesinger.
One piece of equipment to train with, what would it be?
Either a kettlebell or a trap bar.
Biggest accomplishment professionally and or personally?
I would say graduating with my second bachelor's degree.
Any career other than strength and conditioning, what would you choose?
Either a high school history teacher or lawyer.
Last one, I didn't include this on the notes that I sent you. Best place to eat in Phoenix?
Oh, that's a good one. My favorite restaurant in Phoenix is Hula's.
Hula's, okay.
Yes.
I have not been there yet.
They have 2 locations. One's in Old Town, and I would check that one out because it's pretty sweet.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming on and kind of giving us an inside view of the NBA. And if the listeners want to get in touch with you, where can we get more from you?
Sure. I am reasonably active on the Instagrams. That is my favorite social media thing. My handle is Hammer of Dolan, all one word. I have been posting more recently since the whole, not going to work every day thing happened. So get at me on there, and I will be glad to have a conversation.
Awesome, man. Like I said, it was awesome to have you, and we'll be catching up soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you, Coach.
All right, everybody. That concludes this episode with Jeff. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we had recorded this back in May, so if some of it sounds a little bit off timeline-wise, that's why. And then we will have a part 2 coming out as the next episode, as Jeff is back in professional baseball now, and that'll be talking more about his transition back in and an isometrics course that he just put out. So between the 2 episodes, I think he's going to provide a lot of good content for us, but just bear with the difference in timeline and whatnot of when it's coming out versus when we actually recorded. With that being said, the 3 things that I took from Jeff in this episode are 1, to immerse yourself in the culture of the sport that you are working with, 2, to learn as many methodologies as you can, and 3, to understand the quality of your daily work will be determined by how well you respond to things when they go wrong. Again, before we sign off, I just want to give one more shout out to all our sponsors for the podcast. They are Momentous, Woodway, Aura Ring, Garden of Life, Direct Fitness Solutions, Proven 4, and Clean Athlete. So thank you again to all those companies for being all-star sponsors of the PBSCCS. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we will talk to you again on the next one.